There is a machine that has been turning a river into money for 100 years. It burns no fuel, none. Its fuel, water flowing downhill, falls from the sky for free and always will. It has almost nothing to wear out. It can run for a century, and its construction was paid off decades ago. On paper, it is the closest thing to free money the power business has ever produced. And one of the richest companies on Earth just paid around $500 million to tear 4 of them down. Not because they broke, not because the river dried up. They were generating power the entire time. Everyone assumes a dam dies from old age or a flood. These died from a piece of paper. So what does one actually cost to own? Why is the water almost irrelevant? And why would anyone demolish a working power plant that runs on a free river? The buy-in. Start with a surprise. You can actually own a hydroelectric dam. The giant famous ones, Hoover, Grand Coulee, are federal and not for sale. But about half the hydropower in America is not. It is owned by utilities, by companies, by towns, and yes, by private individuals, all under a license from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. There are around 1,700 of these projects in the country. Way 1. You buy an operating dam or a portfolio of them. Brookfield is the largest private owner, holding a vast fleet of hydro plants as long-life cash machines. Way 2. The clever modern play. Most dams in America generate no electricity at all. They were built for water or flood control. You can put a turbine on one that has none, and FERC has a fast track to approve exactly that, since no new dam gets built. Either way, you are buying something strange. Free fuel forever, an asset that lasts 100 years, and a fatal expiration date stamped on the license. Hold that last part. What you inherit. Buy a dam and 4 things come attached. First, the dream. A machine whose fuel is free and never runs out, barely needs maintaining, and runs for a century. Water comes down the river, spins a turbine, makes electricity you sell. Almost nothing else in the economy looks like that. Second, the catch that undoes the dream. You do not own the right to operate it forever. FERC licenses last 30 to 50 years. When that clock runs out, you must apply for a brand new one, and the government decides all over again whether you may keep running your own dam. Third, that relicensing is brutal. On average, it takes 5 to 10 years, and in bad cases, it has dragged on for decades. Some dams run right now on expired licenses because the renewal is stuck. A slow, costly, lawyer-heavy marathon that arrives on a schedule you cannot change. And fourth, the liabilities. A dam that fails is a catastrophe, so safety is on you forever. And modern environmental rules can force you to add fish passage, release water you would rather sell, and meet standards that did not exist when the dam was built. Together, they set the trap this whole business turns on. The revenue layers. 5 ways this thing pays, and the mix has changed dramatically just recently. Number 1. You sell the electricity into the open market or on a long-term contract. For a plant with almost no fuel cost, that is close to pure margin. Number 2. The new gold rush. Firm, clean power for artificial intelligence. Data centers need enormous amounts of electricity that is always on, and hydro is the most reliable clean power there is. Brookfield signed a contract with Google worth around $3 billion for up to 3 gigawatts of hydropower. So the oldest power source on the grid became the hottest. Number 3. Capacity and grid services. A dam goes from 0 to full power in seconds, so the grid pays it just to be available, and again, for stabilizing the network. Number 4. Pumped storage. When power is cheap at night, you pump water uphill into your reservoir. When power is expensive by day, you let it fall back through the turbines and sell it, buying low and selling high with a lake. Number 5. And the water itself, for dams that also handle supply, recreation, and flood control. Now, here is the number that turns this entire business upside down. Listen to that again. A hydroelectric dam is the cheapest power plant on the grid to run, and it can still become a liability nobody wants. Think about why it should be priceless for a moment. The fuel is free forever. The plant lasts 100 years. The construction was paid off decades ago. So one more unit of electricity costs almost nothing to make. It should be the most valuable machine on the grid. But every 30 to 50 years, the license expires. To renew it, FERC can require fish ladders on every structure, minimum water releases that cost you generation, and upgrades running into the millions. On the 4 dams of the Klamath River, the federal analysis concluded that relicensing under the required conditions would leave the project running at a deficit of about $20 million a year. Listen to that again. Not less profit. A $20 million a year loss on a set of dams that had been quietly making power for a century. The water never stopped being free. The turbines never stopped turning. The paperwork stopped making sense. That is the whole secret of this asset. So the cheapest power ever built can turn at the stroke of a regulator's pen into a plant its owner will pay a fortune to demolish. And that is not a theory. It just happened on the largest scale in history. The ledger. So what does it cost to run one? Day to day. Almost nothing. And that is the superpower. Free fuel, few moving parts, small team running a big plant. Next to a gas or coal station constantly buying fuel, a hydro dam is astonishingly cheap to operate. The real costs do not show up monthly. They show up in waves. The first wave is relicensing. Every few decades, that marathon lands, and you pay for years of environmental studies, engineering, and legal fees before you are allowed to keep running. The second wave is the mandates that come with it. Fish passage can cost millions. Minimum flow rules mean water you must let pass without selling the power it could have made. Every drop released for a fish is a drop you did not turn into money. The third wave is age. The concrete, the turbines, the sediment piling up behind the wall all need attention. And the average dam in America is over 60 years old. Here is the strange shape of this ledger. An asset that is cheapest to run is one of the most expensive things in the economy to keep permission to run. And when those two numbers cross, you are in the trap. The trap. Here it is. In one sentence, you do not own a dam. You own a license to operate one until the government decides whether to renew it. Everything flows from that. Your license expires every 30 to 50 years. To renew it, the regulator weighs your electricity against fish, recreation, and water quality, and can demand upgrades that cost more than the dam will ever earn again. In that moment, a profitable power plant becomes a money pit, not because anything physical changed, but because the terms of permission did. And the timing is stuck against you. That renewal can take 5 to 10 years, sometimes longer. Some dams have licenses that expired 20 years ago. Still grinding through the process, frozen. Now, scale it up. Nearly half the non-federal hydro fleet in America, enough to power around 13 million homes, comes up for relicensing within the next decade. Some will be renewed. A growing share will be surrendered and torn out because owners look at the bill and decide the cheapest clean power on the grid is not worth the paperwork to keep, which is exactly the decision that produced the biggest dam demolition in history. The man who built the first one. To see how good this asset can be, go back to where it started. In 1882, a paper mill owner named Henry Rogers in Appleton, Wisconsin, had heard about Thomas Edison's new electric light. Edison had just switched on his famous power station in New York, and that one burned coal. Rogers looked at the Fox River running past his mills and saw what Edison's coal plant did not have. A fuel that cost nothing and never stopped. So he built the first hydroelectric power plant in America. Just 26 days after Edison's coal station switched on, Rogers put a water wheel on the Fox River, connected it to an Edison generator, and lit 2 of his paper mills and his own home, the first home in the world lit by hydroelectric power. That whole plant made about 12.5 kilowatts, a trickle by modern standards. But the idea was perfect on day one. A free river turned a wheel, the wheel turned a generator, and it made electricity with no fuel bill, ever. That plant burned down years later, but a replica still stands in Appleton today. Rogers proved the thing that makes this asset magic. The river shows up for work every day and never sends an invoice. For 140 years, that has been the whole appeal. Right until the paperwork got more expensive than the power. The biggest failure. Which brings us to 4 dams on the Klamath River and the largest demolition of its kind ever attempted. They sit on the Oregon and California border and made electricity for about a century, burning no fuel, running on the river. Their owner was PacifiCorp, a utility owned by Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. On the face of it, perfect assets, free fuel, decades of paid-off history, clean power. Then the license came up for renewal, and the trap closed. To relicense them, federal regulators required fish ladders on all 4 to let salmon reach hundreds of miles of blocked spawning habitat. In 2007, PacifiCorp ran a confidential study comparing the cost of meeting those conditions against just removing the dams. Removal came out cheaper. The federal analysis found relicensing would run the project at a $20 million annual loss. And state regulators concluded that tearing the dams down, rather than spending more than $500 million to modernize them, would save customers over $100 million. So, one of the most valuable companies on Earth agreed to demolish 4 working hydroelectric dams. The project cost around $450 million and finished in 2024, the largest dam removal in United States history. Sit with that. Those dams were not broken. They generated power right up to the end on a free river. What made them worthless was not the machinery or the water. It was the cost of the permission to keep them standing. In the words of the coverage, more of an albatross than a profit generator. How the survivors do it. 5 habits, straight out of everything you just saw. Habit 1. Buy the dam for the free fuel, but price in the relicensing bomb. A dam is only worth what it burns after its next license, not before. If the renewal costs more than the plant makes, you are buying a demolition bill. Habit 2. Add power to dams that already exist. Most generate nothing. Putting a turbine on one is cheaper, faster to permit, and skips the fight over building new. The smartest way in today. Habit 3. Sell the flexibility, not just the energy. The real money now is in firm, always-on power and instant grid response, especially for data centers. River power that was old news a decade ago is now what artificial intelligence is desperate for. Habit 4. Get ahead of the license. Start the renewal early, negotiate the fish and flow terms, and keep the regulators, tribes, and communities on your side, because they can make or break the outcome. Habit 5. Know when to walk away. Sometimes the rational move is to surrender the license and remove the dam, as painful as that is. Do not pour money into keeping a plant the paperwork has already killed. Does this actually work? Both ends, clearly. Start with the good year. Your dam runs on a free river, costs almost nothing, and lasts for generations. And demand for this exact kind of power just exploded, because data centers need firm, clean electricity, and nothing beats an existing dam. When Brookfield can sign $3 billion of hydropower to Google, you hold the most wanted asset on the grid. Now the bad year. Your license comes up. It demands fish ladders and water releases that cost more than the dam earns. You spend a decade and a fortune fighting through relicensing, or you give up and pay to tear the whole thing down like the Klamath. Look at the 2 ends. Brookfield's hydro, free fuel, and firm power, just sold to Google for $3 billion, the most valuable it has ever been. The Klamath dams, the same free fuel and firm power, demolished at a loss of hundreds of millions, because the license demanded more than they could earn. Same machine, same free river. The difference was the paperwork and the timing. So does it work? Yes, if you own a licensed dam with a sane path to renewal, and you sell its flexibility into a grid, suddenly starving for it. And no, if you are staring down a relicensing bill that costs more than the dam is worth, because then the cheapest power ever built becomes something you pay to destroy. Every part of this points at one strange truth. You never really owned the water, and you never really owned the dam. Henry Rogers built the first one on a river that cost nothing to light his own mills, proving free water could make power for a century. Warren Buffett's company owned 4 dams that did precisely that for 100 years and paid nearly $500 million to tear them down because a license demanded more than they could earn. And Brookfield just sold 3 gigawatts of that same river power to Google for $3 billion because artificial intelligence needs firm, clean electricity, and a dam is the cheapest source on Earth. Same machine, same free river, worth a fortune in one owner's hands and a demolition bill in another's. What you actually own is not the water and not even the concrete. It is a permission slip to turn a free river into money, 30 or 40 years at a time. The river was always free. The turbine barely wears out. The only expensive thing on a dam is the right to keep it standing.